So I'm going to be removing wood on these limbs to bring them down to where I get the bow bending on the floor. So floor tillered. Starting to bend a little bit. So before I get too far, I'm going to round off these edges because we had that little bit of grain runoff on these limbs. I want to round these edges off on my back where they meet the sides so that there's less chance of a splinter lifting up there. So I'm just going to do that real quick with a scraper. There's that limb, just smoothing off these sides and rounding these off just a tiny bit. Like I said, before I start bending it, I don't want any sharp edges on the back there where a splinter could lift off. Okay, so now as I work down these limbs, down to get it to where it's bending on the floor, I want to keep an eye on my sides because I don't want to go too far down, and I want to, same thing, I kind of want to work inward with the rasp towards the center of the limb, and I don't want to try to be too flat because I don't want to take too much off of the far side I can't see. So I'm going to go take some off of this side. Take some off of this side, watching my line here so I don't take too much off. And that's creating a little bit of a crown here, and then I'll do some on the other side, and then I'll go back and flatten it. Still pretty stiff. Now when you're testing the floor tillering, don't reef on it really hard because you can over crush the wood on the belly. So when you're building your bow, to keep string follow down, so string follows when you unstring your bow and it stays bent, the way that the bow bends when you have it strung, and it still stays bent. That's string follow. To keep that down on your bows, Um, you should never crush the belly wood past what the intended draw weight is for the bow. So if I'm trying to make a 50-pound bow, I don't want to put 70 or 80 pounds of pressure on that wood, because that'll crush that wood to what an 80 or 70 or 80 or 90-pound bow would have. That wood will be crushed and it stays crushed. So then you've just put the string follow of a heavier bow into your lighter bow. So when we get into floor tillering, don't reef on it real hard. Once you get it to the tillering tree, you want to check it with a scale while you're exercising the limbs and looking at them to make sure you're not pulling it past what its intended weight is. And that'll give you bows that have a lot less string follow and perform better than if you pull a bow when you're working on it, like I said, pull it back to 80, 100 pounds, you've crushed that wood and it'll never go back. So keep that in mind. Keeping this belly pretty flat. Some woods you can have a slightly rounded belly on them, but when you have a rounded belly, all of the compression when the wood is pushing together under compression, when you're drawing the bow, the belly wood's crushing together. All that compression is going to be on the top of the curve. If you have a completely flat belly, the compression is equal across all the way across the limb because it's flat. So a flat limb can withstand more than a curved limb or crowned limb, because it takes an extra strong wood to withstand that compression when it's curved like this. Now, like your yew wood, osage, there's a few woods out there that can handle that. But if you're starting out making bows, especially if it's a wood you've never really dealt with before, you're better off making your bellies flat. I took my scraper and ran down the edges of this just to take off any thing that's sticking out the side, any little slivers. Okay, so that's starting to bend. I'm probably going to quit it about there on that limb. This one could use a little more, it's a little stiffer. Now this limb has a little bit of a dip right here. So when you're doing this, keep an eye on your edges. You want to watch your edges, but you also want to, I like to run my hand along it like this, because your limb has to slowly taper out towards the tip. And you can feel thick spots a lot of times if you just run your hand back and forth on the limb. And so you'll notice me filing sometimes, and I'll flip my file around and work it this way. I'm working it backwards because your file only cuts in one direction. So when you see me flipping it around, I'm cutting from the opposite direction, the other side of the limb. so we're starting to bend now. So next I'll probably stop right there. Now that's starting to bend, and put it on the tillering tree next.